Lena Hart had a reputation that preceded her like the smell of cordite before the sound of gunfire. In the press corps that covered the Middle Eastern conflicts, they called her the girl who gets too close, not as a compliment, but as a warning. She'd been embedded with 17 different units across 4 countries, won a Pulitzer at 29 for her coverage of the Fallujah withdrawal, and accumulated more complaints from commanding officers than any journalist in the theater. The problem wasn't her writing. It was where she wrote it from. While other correspondents filed reports from secured compounds, Lena somehow always ended up in the worst possible places: forward observation posts under mortar fire, convoy trucks rolling through IED alleys, even once in a medevac helicopter that took small arms fire for 40 minutes straight. She had a way of appearing exactly where the story was happening, which meant exactly where people were trying very hard to kill each other. Miss Hart, this is a tactical reconnaissance mission, not a tourism opportunity. Captain Derek Holloway stood with his arms crossed in the pre-dawn darkness of forward operating base Scorpion, his jaw working a piece of gum with the mechanical precision of a man trying to maintain his patience. I don't have the manpower to babysit. Lena adjusted the strap of her camera bag, meeting his eyes without flinching. At 32, she'd perfected the art of looking simultaneously harmless and unmovable. 5'6", dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, wearing the same dust-colored cargo pants and tactical vest that made her blend into any military operation like camouflage. The only things that marked her as press were the laminated credentials hanging around her neck and the Nikon D850 instead of an M4 carbine. Captain, I've been embedded with the 75th Ranger Regiment for 6 weeks. I know the protocols. I stay behind your lines. I don't interfere with operations, and I document what happens. That's the deal your PAO signed off on. She spoke with the calm certainty of someone who'd had this conversation dozens of times before. Besides, you're escorting an intelligence survey team through Dustfire Valley. If there's no story there, I'll come back with footage of rocks and goats. If there is. She let the sentence hang. Holloway exchanged a look with his platoon sergeant, Marcus Gaines, a barrel-chested veteran with 23 years of service etched into the lines around his eyes. Gaines shrugged microscopically. The universal military gesture for your call, sir, but don't say I didn't warn you. Fine, Holloway said finally. But you ride in the trail vehicle with Corporal Reyes. You don't leave that MRAP unless I personally tell you it's secure. Are we clear? Crystal. An hour later, Lena was wedged into the back of the 4th mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle in a convoy of 5, watching the pre-dawn landscape roll past through the small armored window. Beside her, Corporal Vincent Reyes, 23, from San Antonio, with the kind of eager competence that marked him as someone who'd make sergeant before he was 25, was checking his squad's radio frequencies. You really been with 17 different units? Reyes asked, his Texas accent softening the hard consonants. 18, counting you guys, Lena said, keeping her camera steady as she filmed the convoy moving through the narrow mountain road. Marine Force Recon, Army Infantry, Special Forces, couple of National Guard units during the surge. And you just volunteer to go where the shooting is? Lena lowered the camera, looking at him. In the dim red light of the MRAP's interior, Reyes's face was young, unlined. He'd probably been in 1, maybe 2 serious firefights. Still at the stage where combat was something that happened to other people, in other places. Someone has to tell the story, she said quietly. The real one. Not the sanitized version they show back home, not the propaganda, not the politics. Just what happens to people like you when the trigger gets pulled. Reyes nodded slowly. My girlfriend back home, she doesn't really get it. What it's like out here. Maybe if she saw your stuff. Maybe she's better off not getting it, Lena said, turning back to the window. Some things you can't unknow. Outside, the landscape was beginning to shift. The rocky highlands were giving way to a narrow valley, Dustfire, named for the reddish soil that became choking clouds whenever the wind picked up or when helicopters landed. Intelligence suggested it was a transit route for enemy fighters moving between safe houses. Today's mission was simple. Escort a 3-man intelligence team through the valley, let them plant some surveillance equipment, get everyone home for breakfast. Simple missions, Lena had learned, were where things usually went wrong. The convoy halted at 0647 hours, right where the valley narrowed to its tightest point, barely wide enough for 2 vehicles side by side, with steep rocky walls rising on either side like the edges of a grave. Captain Holloway's voice crackled over the radio, calm and professional. All stations, hold position. Intel team is going to do their thing. Maintain security perimeter. Time hack. We're wheels up in 20 minutes. Lena had her camera out immediately, filming the Rangers as they dismounted with practiced efficiency, establishing overlapping fields of fire. This was the good footage, not the explosions or the heroics, but the quiet professionalism of soldiers doing their jobs. The way Sergeant Gaines positioned his squad without needing to speak, the way the youngest private, a kid who couldn't be more than 19, checked his weapon with movements he'd performed 10,000 times in training. But as she panned across the valley, something made her pause. The villages they'd passed coming in, she'd noticed them being unusually quiet. Not the normal quiet of early morning, but the thick, expectant silence of held breath. No dogs barking, no smoke from breakfast fires. And the fields. She zoomed in on a patch of disturbed earth about 200 meters up the northern slope. The soil pattern was wrong, too fresh, too deliberate. "Corporal Reyes," she said quietly, still filming, "does that look weird to you?" Reyes moved to her position, following her camera's direction. His easy demeanor shifted slightly. Could be nothing. Farmers dig all the time. At night, in a field that's been fallow for 2 seasons? Lena had been doing this long enough to read terrain like a language. And where are all the people? We passed 3 villages. Didn't see a single person. They hide when convoys come through. We're not exactly popular. They don't hide this well. Lena lowered the camera, her instincts screaming. She'd felt this before Baghdad, 2007, 30 seconds before a VBIED detonated. Mosul, 2016, 2 minutes before a building collapsed under mortar fire. That electrical charge in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. She made a decision that would later be cited in the after-action report as unauthorized interference with command decisions. Pushing past Reyes, she moved toward where Captain Holloway was standing with the intelligence team, studying a tablet with topographical data. "Captain, I think we should move. Now." Holloway's eyes snapped up, irritation flashing across his face. "Miss Hart, I told you. I know what you told me. I'm telling you the valley's wrong. No civilians. Fresh digging on the northern slope, and we've been stationary for 6 minutes in the narrowest choke point for 5 kilometers." She spoke fast, keeping her voice level. "This is an ambush site. A textbook ambush site. Miss Hart, I appreciate your instincts. But I have actual intelligence officers who..." He never finished the sentence. The IED that detonated under the second MRAP was later estimated at 40 pounds of homemade explosives packed with ball bearings and scrap metal. The blast flipped the 7-ton vehicle onto its side like a child's toy, the sound so loud it turned the world temporarily silent, replaced by a high-pitched ringing that would last for hours. Then the gunfire started. The ambush was professionally executed, the hallmark of enemy fighters who'd been doing this for years, not the amateur hour stuff that got people killed on both sides without achieving anything tactical. They'd let the convoy penetrate deep into the kill zone before initiating, cutting off both the front and rear vehicles simultaneously. Lena hit the ground before her conscious mind processed the decision, her body moving with trained instinct that had nothing to do with being a journalist. Around her, Rangers were taking cover, returning fire, but she could already see the problem. They couldn't identify the shooters. The enemy was dug into positions along both valley walls, camouflaged, using the morning sun at their backs to make visual acquisition nearly impossible. Contact front, contact left, contact right. The radio traffic was controlled but urgent. Sergeant Gaines was moving his squad into better defensive positions, but every time someone tried to maneuver, precision rifle fire drove them back into cover. Snipers. Multiple snipers, working in coordination. Lena's camera was in her hands, muscle memory. Document everything, but her hands were shaking as she filmed the chaos. This was different from the firefights she'd covered before. This wasn't the random spray and pray of insurgents taking potshots. This was calculated, methodical destruction. She saw Private First Class Danny Morris, the 19-year-old she'd filmed earlier, the one who checked his weapon so carefully, stumble backward with red blooming across his shoulder. Saw him go down behind a boulder, his squad mates dragging him to cover, while suppressive fire crackled overhead. We need eyes on those shooters. Captain Holloway's voice over the radio, still controlled, but with an edge now. I need my designated marksmen to acquire targets. But the designated marksmen were pinned down like everyone else. The enemy snipers were good, really good. They weren't exposing themselves, weren't giving anyone a clean shot. They'd fire, displace, fire from a new position. Classic counter-sniper tactics. Lena found herself crouched next to the overturned MRAP, filming as the Rangers tried desperately to establish fire superiority. She'd seen combat before, she'd seen people die, but she'd always been able to maintain the distance, to stay behind the lens, to be the observer rather than the participant. Then Corporal Reyes appeared beside her, moving in a combat crouch, his face pale under the dust and sweat. "Miss Hart, you need to get lower, they've got the high." The crack of the rifle was distinct from the general chaos, a single, precise report. Reyes jerked backward, his helmet flying off as a round grazed his skull, laying open a furrow of scalp that immediately poured blood. He went down hard, his rifle clattering across the rocks. Lena was moving before she thought, grabbing Reyes by his tactical vest and dragging him behind better cover. He was conscious but dazed, blood sheeting down the side of his face, his eyes unfocused. "Stay down," she heard herself say, her voice coming from somewhere outside her body. "You're okay, it's superficial, but stay down." She was checking his wound, another set of reflexes she shouldn't have, when she became aware of someone else beside them. Specialist Kyle Hammond, one of Reyes' squad mates, was there, his face tight with fear and adrenaline. "We're getting killed out here," Hammond said, and there was something in his voice that Lena recognized. Not panic, not yet, but the leading edge of it, the moment when soldiers start to realize they're in a situation they might not walk away from. "We can't see them. We can't suppress them. Every time someone moves, they nail them." Over the radio. "Raptor 6. This is Raptor 2. We've got 3 urgent and 2 priority casualties. We need to break contact, but we can't move without getting chewed up. Where the hell is our counter-sniper support?" "Raptor 2, our marksmen can't acquire. They're too well concealed. We need..." Static, then silence, then a different voice, younger, scared. "Raptor 6 is hit, captain's down." The situation, already desperate, had just become critical. Lena's camera hung forgotten around her neck as she watched Hammond lean around cover, fire a burst in the general direction of the enemy, accomplish nothing, and duck back. Around them, the firefight was settling into a terrible rhythm. Rangers trying to move, enemy snipers punishing any movement, casualties mounting. Reyes, still bleeding but conscious now, grabbed her arm with a grip stronger than she expected. His eyes were clearer, focused on her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "You see it, don't you?" he said, his voice rough. "The way they're positioned, the firing patterns. You see it." Lena didn't answer, but her eyes were already tracking the valley walls, reading the terrain in a way she'd sworn she'd never do again. There, a slight discoloration on the northern slope, right where the rock changed from gray to reddish. Movement, so subtle most people would miss it. A muzzle flash from the eastern ridge, low angle, which meant the shooter was in a depression. Another shot from the west, but the sound arrived before the impact, which meant elevated position. She was counting them, mapping them. Her mind was building a tactical picture without her permission. The old training surfacing like something rising from deep water. 6, maybe 7 primary shooters, with at least 3 more in reserve. A well-coordinated team, probably led by someone who trained with actual military snipers. They had the Rangers completely locked down. "Give me the rifle," she heard herself say. Reyes stared at her, blood still dripping from his scalp wound. "What?" Lena's hands were shaking, her breath coming too fast, but her voice was steady. "Hammond, I need you to listen very carefully. I'm going to move to that elevated position." She pointed to a boulder cluster 20 meters away, higher ground with a clear view down the valley. "When I move, I need you to lay down suppressive fire on the eastern ridge, not at any specific target, just noise. Make them keep their heads down for 10 seconds. Miss Hart, you're a civilian, you can't." "Corporal Reyes, I need your rifle, and I need it now." There was a moment later. When Lena would review her camera footage, she'd see it captured in the background of a shot where Reyes looked at her, really looked at her. And something in his expression changed, like he was seeing past the press credentials and the camera, seeing something underneath. His hands moved to his SR-25 semi-automatic sniper rifle, the standard designated marksman weapon for ranger units. He handed it over without another word. "Hammond," Lena said, checking the rifle with movements that came back like breathing. "On my count. 3, 2, 1. Now." She moved. The boulder cluster was exactly where Lena needed to be, elevated enough for line of sight, stable enough for accurate shooting, with a natural depression that would hide her profile from most angles. She slid into position with practiced efficiency, the SR-25 settling against her shoulder like it had never left. For 3 years, she'd told herself she'd never do this again. 3 years of photographing wars instead of fighting them, of documenting violence instead of participating in it. 3 years of convincing herself that she could witness suffering without adding to it. All of that fell away the moment she looked through the scope. The world narrowed, simplified, became a series of calculations: wind speed, range, elevation, target movement patterns. Her breathing slowed automatically, finding the rhythm between heartbeats where the body was most still. Her finger found the trigger with the familiarity of a prayer repeated 10,000 times. The first target presented itself almost immediately, a fighter on the northern slope, partially concealed behind a rock formation. He'd just fired, which meant he was in his most exposed position, still settling back into cover. Range: 387 meters. Wind: negligible, maybe 2 miles per hour from the east. Elevation: minimal correction needed. Lena's crosshairs settled on center mass. Exhale. The space between heartbeats. The shot surprised her, which meant it was perfect. Through the scope, she saw the fighter jerk backward, his rifle clattering down the slope. She was already traversing, finding the next target, another shooter on the eastern ridge who'd been pinning down Sergeant Gaines's squad. He was better concealed, just the top of his head and his rifle visible, but it was enough. Range: 412 meters. Slight upward angle, compensate for distance. The second shot echoed across the valley like thunder. The enemy sniper's rifle went silent. Now, the muscle memory was fully engaged, overriding conscious thought. Lena's mind had shifted into what her instructors at Scout Sniper School had called the loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. Over and over, faster than conscious thought, each cycle building on the last. Third target: Western Ridge, 340 meters, firing position behind a split boulder. She waited 3 seconds until he leaned out for his next shot, then put a round through the gap at precisely the moment his face appeared. Fourth target: a spotter working with one of the eastern snipers. He was better hidden, just a shadow in a depression, but she'd been watching his shooter's pattern and knew where he had to be. She put the round 6 inches to the left of where the shooter had been firing from, heard a distant cry. Fifth target: northern slope again, a shooter who'd been smart enough to displace after his partner went down. But he made the fundamental mistake of moving to the nearest good position instead of a less obvious one. Lena had already calculated where he'd go, was waiting when he got there. The firefight's dynamics were changing. The Rangers, sensing their enemy's suppression lifting, were beginning to maneuver more aggressively. But there were still more shooters, and they were starting to realize they were being hunted. Sixth and seventh targets came in quick succession, 2 fighters who'd been working as a team, one spotting while the other shot. They were good, professional, but Lena was better. She took the spotter first, knowing it would force the shooter to expose himself. When he did, trying to drag his partner to cover, she was ready. The 8th target was trickier. A sniper who'd been smart enough to build a deep fighting position with multiple firing ports. He'd been shifting between them, never presenting the same angle twice. Lena watched his pattern for 15 seconds, then put 3 rapid shots through 2 different ports. The third shot found him as he tried to displace to his backup position. 9th target: the commander. She could tell from his position slightly elevated, with sight lines to most of the other enemy positions, and from the way he was using a radio instead of shooting. Range: 468 meters, pushing the effective limits of the SR-25. He was smart, staying mostly concealed, but she'd been watching his silhouette against the skyline, waiting for the moment when he'd have to lean out to get visual confirmation on his people. There, just for a second, his head and shoulders visible as he scanned the valley. The shot took longer to arrive than the others, the bullet dropping more noticeably over the longer distance. But it was true. Through the scope, Lena saw him crumple. That left two flankers who'd been positioned to cut off any Ranger retreat. They were pulling back now, realizing their ambush had been turned against them. Lena tracked the first one as he scrambled up the western slope, moving fast but not erratically. She led him by 3 feet, accounting for his speed and direction. The 10th shot caught him mid-stride. The 11th and final target was the hardest, a fighter who'd gone to ground completely, no longer visible, no longer shooting. But Lena had seen which depression he'd disappeared into, and she knew the only way out. She kept her crosshairs on that spot for 90 seconds, her breathing steady, her finger taking up the trigger slack. When he finally emerged, thinking the threat had passed, she was waiting. 11 shots. 11 targets. The valley fell silent except for the ringing echoes of gunfire fading into the distance. Lena lowered the rifle, her hand starting to shake now that the adrenaline was crashing. Around her, she could hear Rangers calling out, "We're clear! We're clear!" and the sound of boots on rock as they began securing the area, treating casualties, getting ready to evacuate. She sat there, behind the boulder, the SR-25 across her lap, and tried to remember how to breathe. The panic attack hit her in waves, each one larger than the last. First came the shaking her hands, then her arms, then her whole body trembling like she'd been pulled from freezing water. Then the nausea, sudden and overwhelming, bending her double as she vomited behind the boulder, her camera swinging wildly on its strap. Then the hyperventilation, her lungs refusing to work properly, each breath too shallow, too fast, black spots dancing at the edges of her vision. She was dimly aware of voices around her, concerned, confused, but they seemed to come from a great distance, filtered through cotton and water. Someone was taking the rifle from her nerveless fingers. Someone else was putting a hand on her shoulder, saying words she couldn't process. The images wouldn't stop coming. Not from today, from before. 4 years ago. Ramadi. The boy. He'd been 13, maybe 14. They'd confirmed it later from the autopsy, though at the time, through her scope, he'd looked older, old enough to be a threat, old enough to be carrying the suicide vest they'd been warned about, moving toward the checkpoint where Marines were processing civilian evacuees. She'd made the shot at 340 meters. Perfect center mass. Textbook. Except there had been no vest. Just a boy with a package his uncle had told him to deliver to the checkpoint medicine for his sister, they found later. The insurgents had used him as a diversion, counting on exactly what happened. The Americans seeing a military-age male approaching a sensitive position and reacting accordingly. Lena had been cleared by the investigation. The shoot was ruled good. The intelligence had been solid. She'd followed her training perfectly, and when her enlistment ended 2 months later, she'd turned in her rifle, her uniform, her clearances, and walked away from the Marine Corps with an honorable discharge and a chest full of medals she'd immediately locked in a storage unit and never looked at again. She'd become a journalist because she thought documenting war would be different from fighting it. Thought bearing witness was a form of redemption. Thought if she could just show people what war really was, the cost, the chaos, the waste, then maybe the boy in Ramadi wouldn't have died for nothing. But she'd been lying to herself, because the skills didn't go away, the training didn't fade. And when Rangers were dying in front of her, she'd reached for a rifle like a drowning person reaches for air. "Miss Hart, Lena, look at me." Sergeant Gaines was crouched in front of her, his weathered face creased with concern. Behind him, she could see other Rangers watching, their expressions ranging from confusion to something that looked like awe. "I need you to breathe with me," Gaines said, his voice calm, professional. "In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. Can you do that?" She tried, failed, tried again. Slowly, agonizingly, her breathing began to stabilize. "Good, that's good. Now, I need you to tell me something." Gaines studied her face. "You're not just a journalist, are you?" Lena couldn't speak, managed to shake her head. "Marine Scout Sniper?" he asked quietly. A nod. "How long ago?" 4 years. "I've been out 4 years." Her voice sounded strange, ragged. Gaines glanced over his shoulder at the valley, where Rangers were moving cautiously, clearing the positions Lena had just neutralized. "Well, you sure as hell haven't forgotten how. What's your name?" "Your real name. What they called you." "Hart. Lena Hart. That's real." I mean, your call sign. Your team designation. Lena closed her eyes. Sparrow 1-1. I was Sparrow 1-1. 3rd Marine Division, 1st Battalion, Echo Company, Scout Sniper Platoon. The silence that followed felt heavy, significant. Then Gaines let out a low whistle. Sparrow 1-1. Holy shit, I knew that name. You're the one who... Ramadi, right? The checkpoint incident? I don't want to talk about it. Fair enough. Gaines stood, offering her a hand. But we need to talk about what just happened here. Because you just pulled off something I've never seen in 23 years of doing this job. 11 enemy combatants, 11 shots, all at extended range, under combat stress, with a weapon you picked up 30 seconds before using it. That's not luck. That's not even just skill. That's something else entirely. Lena took his hand, let him pull her up. Her legs felt weak, but they held. I saw Rangers dying. I couldn't, she stopped, unable to finish. You couldn't not help. Gaines nodded slowly. I understand that, but you need to understand something too. What you did today, those 11 shots, they're going to have consequences. People are going to ask questions about who you are, about why a journalist shoots like one of the best snipers I've ever seen, about what else you might not be telling us. I'm not hiding anything. I left the Marines. I became a photographer. That's the truth. Maybe. But the truth has a way of being complicated. Gaines looked at her seriously. Captain Holloway's been hit, nothing critical, but he's out of action. I'm assuming tactical command for the evacuation. I need to know, can you hold it together for the next 2 hours while we get our wounded out and secure this site? Lena looked down at her hands. They were still shaking, but less now. Yes. Good. Because we've got 3 urgent casualties that need evac, plus Holloway and Reyes and 4 others with various non-critical wounds. We're calling in a medevac, but until it arrives, we're vulnerable. I need everyone who can hold a rifle on security. Are you everyone? She understood what he was asking. Could she pick up that weapon again, after swearing she never would? Could she become Sparrow 1-1 one more time? If you need me to, she said quietly. But Sergeant Gaines? When this is over, when we get back to base, I'm done. I'm going back to being just a journalist. No more rifles. No more shooting. This was a one-time thing. Gaines studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, I believe you. But Lena? The world has a way of not caring what we decide we're done with. Sometimes the things we're good at, the things we've trained for, they don't let us go that easy. He was right. Lena knew he was right. But she couldn't think about that now. Couldn't think about anything except getting through the next 2 hours, getting the wounded to safety, and then she'd figure out what came next. Corporal Reyes appeared, his head wrapped in a hasty field dressing, his face pale but determined. He was carrying the SR-25 that Lena had used. "Ma'am," he said, and there was something different in his voice now. Respect, yes, but also a kind of understanding. I wanted to say thank you for saving my life, for saving all our lives, really. That was... He trailed off, unable to find words. Don't, Lena said softly. Don't thank me. I just did what I had to do. That's not what I saw. Reyes held out the rifle. I saw someone who was terrified, someone whose hands were shaking so bad I thought she might drop the weapon. Someone who was clearly fighting every instinct that told her not to do this. And she did it anyway. That's not just training, ma'am. That's courage. Lena took the rifle, its weight familiar and terrible in her hands. Courage is just fear. That's already said its prayers. Corporal, I learned that from someone smarter than me. Your scout sniper instructor? My therapist. Lena managed a weak smile. Come on, let's get your friends home. The medevac arrived 43 minutes later, 2 UH-60 Black Hawks with armed escort, dropping into the valley in a storm of dust and rotor wash. The Rangers moved efficiently, loading the most critical casualties first, then the walking wounded. Lena filmed it all, her camera steady now, her hands no longer shaking. She'd found her center again, or at least a temporary facsimile of it. The immediate crisis was over. The shooting had stopped. Now came the slower, harder work of processing what had happened. As the helicopters lifted off, carrying Captain Holloway and the others to the combat support hospital at Kandahar Airfield, Sergeant Gaines organized the remaining Rangers to secure the site. They moved through the valley, checking the positions Lena had engaged, confirming kills, collecting intelligence. Lena followed at a distance, filming but not interfering. She watched as young Rangers, some of them on their first deployment, processed what they were seeing. 11 enemy fighters, all killed by precise rifle fire, all at distances that required expert marksmanship. She heard the whispers start, saw the looks. The Rangers were talking among themselves, piecing together what had happened, and the story that was emerging had a mythic quality to it that made Lena deeply uncomfortable. I heard she made all 11 shots in under 3 minutes. Dude, I saw her. She wasn't even using a scope for the closer ones, just instinct. Someone said she used to be a Marine sniper, like a really famous one. Sparrow 1-1. That was her call sign. I looked it up on my phone. There's some crazy stories about her from Fallujah. Lena tried to ignore it, focusing on her work, but the attention was unavoidable. By the time they'd secured the site and begun the process of preparing to move out, the intelligence team, having wisely decided their surveillance equipment could wait for a less eventful day, the story had taken on a life of its own. Private First Class Danny Morris, the young ranger who'd been shot in the shoulder during the initial ambush, sought her out as combat medics were preparing him for transport in the second medevac wave. Miss Hart? His voice was tight with pain, but his eyes were clear. I wanted to. I heard what you did, what they're saying you did. Is it true? What are they saying? That you saved the entire unit. That you shot 11 insurgents with 11 bullets. That you're some kind of legendary sniper who retired and became a journalist. Lena sat down next to him, careful not to jostle his bandaged shoulder. Some of that's true, some of it's already getting exaggerated. What matters is you're alive, Morris. You're going to be fine. Shoulder wound like that, you'll be back to full duty in a few months. But did you really? Yeah, Lena said quietly. I really did. And it was the worst thing I've done in 4 years, and I hope I never have to do it again. Morris looked confused. But you saved us. How is that the worst thing? Because every time I close my eyes, I'm going to see those 11 people dying, and I'm going to remember that I used to be really good at making people die. And I thought I'd left that behind, and turns out I hadn't. She looked at him seriously. You know what the hardest part of being a soldier is, Morris? It's not the shooting, it's living with the shooting afterward. She left him thinking about that, moving away before he could ask more questions. The story broke 3 days later. Lena had hoped it wouldn't, had hoped that the military's natural instinct for operational security would keep the details of what happened in Dustfire Valley quiet. But she'd underestimated 2 things: the power of the Rangers to communicate with their families back home, and the speed at which social media could amplify a good story. It started with a post on a military forum. Anyone else hear about the journalist who went full sniper in Afghanistan? Supposedly saved a whole Ranger platoon. Then a Reddit thread. Confirmed. Pulitzer-winning war correspondent is actually ex-Marine Scout sniper. Here's what we know. Then the mainstream military press picked it up. Mystery shooter in Dustfire Valley identified as former Marine sniper Lena Hart, now war correspondent. And finally, inevitably, civilian media. She traded her rifle for a camera, then Rangers started dying. Lena watched the story spiral from her tent at FOB Scorpion. Her laptop open, her jaw clenched. The details were mostly accurate. Someone had leaked the after-action report, but the tone, the framing, it was all wrong. They were making her into a hero, into some kind of warrior poet who'd return to the battlefield to save American lives. They didn't understand, couldn't understand. Her phone buzzed. A text from her editor at the Associated Press. Lena, we need to talk about this. You never mentioned military service in your background. We need clarification before we can continue running your pieces. Another text, this one from a book publisher. 6-figure advance for your story. War correspondent reveals secret past as elite sniper. We can have a ghostwriter to you within 48 hours. Another, Fox News wants you for an interview. Name your price. Another, CNN, MSNBC, BBC, all requesting comment. Lena turned off her phone. There was a knock on her tent pole. Miss Hart, you decent? Corporal Reyes ducked inside, his head still bandaged, but his eyes bright. Sergeant Gaines sent me. He thought you might want to see something. If it's another interview request. No, ma'am. It's different. Come on. She followed him across the base to the company headquarters where Sergeant Gaines was waiting with a tablet. You need to see this, he said, handing it to her. The video on the screen showed a middle-aged woman sitting in what looked like a living room in suburban America. The caption identified her as Patricia Rodriguez, mother of Marine Lance Corporal Miguel Rodriguez. I saw the news about Lena Hart, the woman was saying, her eyes red from crying but her voice steady, about what she did in Afghanistan, and I wanted people to know something, about what she did before. Lena's hands tightened on the tablet, her stomach dropping. 4 years ago, my son Miguel was killed in Ramadi. He was 13 years old. The Marines shot him at a checkpoint because they thought he was carrying a bomb. He wasn't. He was carrying medicine for his little sister. The Marine who shot him was Sergeant Lena Hart. Lena couldn't breathe, couldn't look away from the screen. The investigation cleared her. Patricia Rodriguez continued. Said she followed protocol. Said it was a good shoot, that intelligence had warned of suicide bombers. And maybe that's true. Maybe she did everything right according to the rules. But my son is still dead. Here it comes, Lena thought. Here comes the condemnation I deserve. But I want to say something else, Patricia Rodriguez said, and her voice was shaking now. After Miguel died, Sergeant Hart wrote me a letter. It was the only letter I got from anyone in the military that didn't sound like a template, like words someone was required to say. She told me she was sorry, that she would carry Miguel with her for the rest of her life, that she was leaving the military because she couldn't trust herself anymore. The woman wiped her eyes, and I hated her for that letter. Hated that she got to walk away, got to leave the military, got to have a future, when my son was in the ground. I wrote back, sent a letter telling her I'd never forgive her, that I hoped she spent every day thinking about what she'd done. Mrs. Rodriguez, someone off camera started to say, but she held up a hand. Let me finish. What I want to say now is this. I was wrong. Not about my grief, I'll grieve Miguel forever, but about Lena Hart. Because I see now that she was a soldier put in an impossible situation, told to make life and death decisions in fractions of a second, and she's been living with the consequences ever since. And when I heard what she did in Afghanistan, saving those Rangers, I understood something. She didn't pick up that rifle because she wanted to. She picked it up because she had to. Because she couldn't watch more young people die if she had the power to stop it. Patricia Rodriguez looked directly at the camera. So if Lena Hart is watching this, you don't have my forgiveness, because I'm not the one who gets to give that. Only God can forgive what happened to Miguel. But you have my understanding, and I hope that's worth something. The video ended. Lena sat in silence for a long moment, the tablet shaking in her hands. Sergeant Gaines and Corporal Reyes said nothing, giving her space. Finally, she looked up. How did she know? How did she find out about Afghanistan? The news is everywhere, ma'am, Reyes said quietly. Everyone's talking about Sparrow 1-1. I didn't want this. Lena's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't want to be a story. I just wanted to tell stories. I know, Gaines said, but sometimes the story finds you anyway. The alert came at 0342 hours, shattering the fragile peace that had settled over Fob Scorpion. Lena jerked awake in her tent, adrenaline surging before she was fully conscious, the sound of the base alarm system drilling into her skull. All personnel, this is not a drill. Prepare for incoming. Repeat. Prepare for incoming. She was moving on instinct, grabbing her camera bag and body armor, pulling on her boots as the first mortar round hit somewhere on the far side of the base. The explosion was distant but unmistakable, the distinctive crump of indirect fire, the sound every soldier in a combat zone learned to identify instantly. Outside, Rangers were running to their assigned defensive positions, the base transforming from a sleeping facility to a combat outpost in seconds. Lena followed the flow of bodies toward the nearest bunker, her journalist's instinct warring with her survival instinct: document, or take cover, shoot pictures, or just survive. She chose documentation. Always choose documentation. Sergeant Gaines found her 3 minutes later, filming the organized chaos as Rangers manned fighting positions and the base's counter-battery radar tried to track the source of the incoming fire. Hart, get to the bunker, now. In a minute, I need to get footage of... That wasn't a request. Gaines grabbed her arm, his face grim. This isn't random harassment fire. This is a coordinated assault. They're hitting us with mortars to soften us up, and we've got reports of ground forces massing about 2 clicks out. This base is about to get hit hard. The second volley of mortars proved his point. 6 rounds this time, walking across the base in a textbook fire pattern. One hit the motor pool, sending up a plume of black smoke. Another impacted near the dining facility. The third came close enough to their position that Lena felt the concussion in her chest. "How many people do you have?" she asked, following Gaines toward the command post. 53 Rangers, 22 support personnel, and 1 very stubborn journalist, against an estimated force of 80 to 100 insurgents with mortars, rockets, and enough small arms to start a revolution. Gaines's radio crackled with rapid-fire updates, positions being manned, ammunition being distributed, casualty reports already starting to come in. "What do you need me to do?" Gaines looked at her. "I need you to get in a bunker and stay there until this is over, Sergeant." "But," he continued, cutting her off, "I also need every person who can shoot to be ready to shoot, so I'm going to give you a choice. You can be Lena Hart, journalist, who observes from safety, or you can be Sparrow 11, Marine Scout Sniper, who helps us hold this base, but you can't be both, not today." The artillery barrage was intensifying. Through the darkness, Lena could see tracer rounds, beginning to arc toward the perimeter small arms fire, probing the defenses, looking for weak points. She thought about Patricia Rodriguez, about forgiveness and understanding, about the boy in Ramadi and the Rangers in Dustfire Valley, about the weight of a rifle in her hands and the weight of a camera around her neck. "Give me a rifle," she said, "and put me somewhere I can do the most good." They put her on the western tower, a sandbag position with good visibility across the approach routes, but limited cover from indirect fire. It was the kind of position that required someone who could shoot accurately at range, suppress enemy movement, and not panic under sustained fire. It was a sniper position, which meant they'd given it to her on purpose. Lena set up with an M110 semi-automatic sniper system, a step up from the SR-25 she'd used in Dustfire Valley, and settled into the familiar rhythm of defensive overwatch. The base's security lights had been killed to deny the enemy easy targeting, leaving everything illuminated by moonlight and the occasional flare. Her radio crackled. "Overwatch 3, this is Raptor 1. We've got movement on the western approach, approximately 600 meters. Multiple targets advancing in fire team-sized elements. Can you engage?" Lena put her eye to the scope, scanning the darkness. There, shadows moving against shadows, the slight bob of heads as fighters moved in tactical bounds. They were good, using cover effectively, advancing under the concealment of their own mortar fire. Raptor 1, Overwatch 3. I have visual. Count 8 targets in the first wave, possibly more behind. Engage at your discretion. Priority is stopping their advance before they get within rocket range. Lena settled into position, controlling her breathing, finding her center. This was different from Dustfire Valley. There, she'd been reacting, responding to an immediate threat. Here, she was choosing, deliberately deciding to pick up a weapon, to become a combatant, to cross back over a line she'd sworn she'd never cross again. But Rangers were about to die if she didn't. The first shot took the lead fighter at 580 meters, a textbook engagement, center mass, instant drop. The enemy formation immediately went to ground, confused about where the shot had come from. Lena was already traversing to the second target. This one was smarter, using a depression for cover, but he made the mistake of staying stationary. At this range, stationary meant dead. The third and fourth targets came quickly, 2 fighters trying to flank toward the northern perimeter. Lena caught them in the open, in mid-movement. Neither made it to cover. The enemy responded with suppressive fire, but they were shooting at shadows, not knowing exactly where she was. Lena displaced 15 meters to a secondary position in the same tower, settled, found her next target. The defense of FOB Scorpion lasted for 47 minutes, a lifetime of sustained combat that later analysis would call one of the most intense small unit actions of the Afghan conflict. The enemy came in waves, using darkness and numbers to overwhelm the defenders, but they hadn't counted on the Rangers' discipline or their unexpected force multiplier in the western tower. Lena lost count of her shots after the 12th. Just kept shooting, displacing, shooting again. Each target was a decision, each trigger pull was a choice. And each choice was one less enemy fighter, advancing on Rangers who were depending on her. The attack broke at 0429 hours. When air support finally arrived, a pair of Apache helicopters that lit up the remaining enemy positions with 30mm cannon fire. The insurgents broke contact, melting back into the darkness, leaving their dead behind. In the aftermath, as the base conducted damage assessment and treated wounded, Lena sat in her tower position, the M110 across her lap, shaking again but for different reasons this time. She'd done it, crossed back over, become Sparrow 111 one more time. And the worst part, the part that made her hands shake and her stomach churn, was how natural it had felt. How easy it had been to slip back into that role, to become the weapon her training had forged. Sergeant Gaines climbed up to her position as dawn was breaking, his face streaked with soot and sweat but his eyes clear. "We held," he said simply. 3 Rangers wounded, none critical. Estimated 23 enemy KIA, unknown number wounded. The base is secure. He paused. "The western approach, where you were positioned. We counted 14 confirmed enemy dead, all from precision rifle fire, all at extended range." Lena said nothing. "There's a principle in military theory," Gaines continued, sitting down beside her. "It says that sometimes the right person in the right place at the right time can change the outcome of an entire battle. That's what you did tonight. That's what you did in Dustfire Valley. You're that person, Lena. Whether you want to be or not." "I don't want to be," Lena said softly. "I really, truly don't want to be that person anymore." "I believe you." Gaines looked out at the dawn, light spreading across the Afghan landscape. "But I think you need to accept something. You're never going to stop being Sparrow 111. It's not a job you had, it's who you are. The only choice you have is what you do with it." 3 weeks later, Lena stood in the Associated Press office in Kabul, a flash drive in her hand containing the most important story of her career. Her editor, Marcus Washington, sat across from her, his expression unreadable. "Before you give me whatever's on that drive, I need to know. Are you still our correspondent? Or are you something else now?" "I'm a journalist," Lena said firmly. "That's all I am. That's all I want to be." "Except you're not, though. Are you?" Marcus leaned back in his chair. "You're the most famous war correspondent in the world right now. Sparrow 111 rises again. The sniper who became a journalist who became a sniper again. Every network wants you. Every publication wants your story. You could write your ticket anywhere. I don't want to write my ticket. I want to write the truth." "Then tell me the truth. What's on that drive?" Lena slid it across the desk. "It's a 7,000-word feature about what happened in Dustfire Valley and at Fob Scorpion. But it's not about me. It's about the Rangers, about Corporal Reyes and Private Morris and Sergeant Gaines and all the others. About what they face every day. About the impossible decisions they have to make and the cost of those decisions." She paused. "And yes, I'm in it, because I can't tell their story honestly without telling mine. But I'm not the hero of this piece, Marcus. They are." Marcus loaded the flash drive, began reading. Lena watched his face as he scrolled through the document, saw his expression shift from skepticism to engagement to something like awe. When he finished, he looked up at her. Lena, this is extraordinary. It's honest and brutal and compassionate all at once. But you know it's going to change everything, right? You can't unring this bell. Once you publish this, you're not going to be able to hide behind the camera anymore. I know. And the military, some of them are going to be pissed that you revealed your background without going through proper channels. There could be repercussions. I know that too. And the book deals, the interview requests, the speaking tours, they're all going to intensify. You're going to become the story, whether you want to or not. I understand." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "Why? Why now? You could have stayed quiet, filed a standard report, let the legend build without your participation." Lena thought about Patricia Rodriguez, about the boy in Ramadi, about Corporal Reyes handing her a rifle while blood dripped from his scalp, about Sergeant Gaines's words, "You're never going to stop being Sparrow 111. Because someone needs to tell the truth about what war does to people," she said finally. "Not the sanitized version, not the propaganda, not the glory stories. The real truth about how it changes you, how it marks you, how it never really lets you go." And I can tell that story in a way that maybe nobody else can, because I've been on both sides of it. The warrior and the witness. Something like that. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay, I'll run it. Front page, full feature, your byline. But Lena, after this comes out, your life is going to get complicated. Are you ready for that? No, Lena admitted, but I don't think I get to choose whether I'm ready. I only get to choose whether I tell the truth or stay silent. And I've been silent long enough. The article ran 3 days later under the headline, The Rifle and the Camera, One Woman's Journey, from Marine Sniper to War Correspondent and Back Again. It went viral within hours. Major news networks picked it up, social media exploded with commentary. The Pentagon issued a brief statement confirming Lena's service record and commending her actions in Afghanistan. Veterans groups debated whether she'd crossed ethical lines. Journalism organizations questioned whether an embedded reporter could ethically engage in combat. But the response that mattered most came from the Rangers. Corporal Vincent Reyes was the first to reach out via email. Ma'am, I read your piece. Thank you for telling our story the right way. And thank you for being honest about the cost. A lot of people don't understand that part. That doing the right thing doesn't always make you feel good. That sometimes you carry it with you forever. We understand. And we're grateful. Private Danny Morris sent a Facebook message. My mom read your article, she cried. Said it helped her understand what I've been trying to tell her about what it's like over here. Thank you for that. And from Sergeant Marcus Gaines, a simple text. You did good, Sparrow. You told the truth. That's all any of us can do. 6 months later, Lena stood in a hotel ballroom in New York City, accepting the National Press Club Award for Distinguished Service in Journalism. The M110 she'd used at FOB Scorpion sat in a display case in the Rangers Regimental Museum. The camera she'd carried through 18 embeds hung around her neck, ready for the next assignment. In her acceptance speech, she spoke about the dual nature of bearing witness, how sometimes observation required action, how sometimes the truth could only be told by participating in it, how sometimes the line between warrior and witness wasn't as clear as anyone wanted it to be. But she ended with a promise. I came to war journalism because I thought documenting violence was different from committing it. I learned in Afghanistan that sometimes the difference is smaller than we'd like to believe, and that knowledge is something I'll carry forever. But I also learned that the truth, the complicated, difficult, uncomfortable truth, is worth telling, even when it implicates us in the story. She held up her camera. This is my weapon now, the only one I plan to carry. The rifle saved lives in Afghanistan. This camera will save truth, and in the long run, I believe truth is more powerful than any bullet. The audience applauded, but Lena barely heard it. She was already thinking about her next assignment, a embed with a Marine unit in Syria, scheduled to begin in 2 weeks. Because Sergeant Gaines had been right about one thing, she would never stop being Sparrow 1-1. The skills, the training, the instincts, they were part of her now, permanently inscribed in muscle memory and neural pathways. But she could choose what to do with them. She could choose to witness. She could choose to document. She could choose to tell the stories of the people who couldn't tell their own. And if, someday, circumstances forced her to pick up a rifle again, if Rangers were dying and she was the only one who could stop it, well, she'd deal with that choice when it came. Until then, she had stories to tell. And the truth, she'd learned, was the heaviest weapon of all.